Riquet with the Tuft by Charles Perrault. Once upon a time there was a queen who had a son so ugly and so misshapen that it was long disputed whether he had human form. A fairy who was at his birth said, however, that he would be very amiable for all that, since he would have uncommon good sense. She even added that it would be within his power, by virtue of a gift she had just given him, to bestow as much sense as he pleased on the person he loved the best. All this somewhat comforted the poor queen. And it is true that this child no sooner began to talk than he said 1,000 pretty things. And in all his actions there was an intelligence that was quite charming. I forgot to tell you that he was born with a little tuft of hair on top of his head, and that's why they called him Little Riquet with the Tuft, Riquet being the family name. 7 or 8 years later, the queen of a neighbouring kingdom had 2 daughters who were twins. The firstborn of these was more beautiful than the day, whereat the queen was so very glad that those present were afraid that her excess of joy would do her harm. The same fairy who was present at the birth of little Riquet with the Tuft was also there, and to moderate the queen's gladness, she declared that this little princess should have no sense at all, but should be as stupid as she was pretty. This mortified the queen extremely, but afterward she had a far greater sorrow, for the second daughter proved to be very ugly. "Do not afflict yourself so much, madam," said the fairy. "Your daughter shall have her recompense. She shall have so much, a great portion of sense, that the want of beauty will hardly be perceived." "God grant it," replied the queen, "but is there no way to make the eldest, who is so pretty, have any sense?" "I can do nothing for her, madam, as to sense," answered the fairy, "but as there is nothing I would not do for your satisfaction, I give her for a gift that she shall have power to make handsome the person who shall please her best." As these princesses grew up, their perfections grew with them. All the public talk was of the beauty of the elder and the rare good sense of the younger. It is true also that their defects increased considerably with their age too. The younger visibly grew uglier and uglier, and the elder became every day more and more stupid. She either made no answer at all to what was asked her, or said something very silly. She was, with all this, also so unhandy that she could not place 4 pieces of china upon the mantelpiece without breaking one of them, nor drink a glass of water without spilling half of it upon her clothes. Although beauty is a very great advantage in young people, the younger sister was always the more preferred in society. People would indeed go first to the beauty, to look upon and admire her, but turn aside soon after to the wit, to hear 1,000 most entertaining and agreeable things. And it was amazing to see, in less than a quarter of an hour's time, the elder had not a soul near her, and the whole company crowding about the younger. The elder, dull as she was, could not fail to notice this, and without the slightest regret would have given all her beauty to have half her sister's wit. One day, as she had hidden herself in a wood to bewail her misfortune, she saw coming towards her a very disagreeable little man, but most magnificently dressed. This was the young prince, Riquet with the Tuft, who, having fallen in love with her upon seeing her picture, many of which were distributed all the world over, had left his father's kingdom to have the pleasure of seeing and talking with her. Overjoyed to find her thus alone, he addressed himself to her with all imaginable politeness and respect. After he had paid her the ordinary compliments, he observed that she was extremely melancholy, and he said to her, "I cannot comprehend, madam, how a person so beautiful as you can be so sorrowful as you seem to be. For though I can boast of having seen a great number of exquisitely charming ladies, I can say that I never beheld anyone whose beauty approaches yours." "You are pleased to say so," answered the princess. And there she stopped. "Beauty," replied Riquet with the Tuft, "is such a great advantage that it ought to take the place of all things else. And since you possess this treasure, I can see nothing that could possibly very much afflict you." "I'd far rather," cried the princess, "be as ugly as you are and have sense, than have the beauty I possess and be as stupid as I am." "There is nothing, madam," returned he, "shows more that we have good sense than to believe we have none." "I do not know that," said the princess, "but I know very well that I am very senseless, and that vexes me mightily." "If that be all which troubles you, madam, I can very easily put an end to your affliction." "And how will you do that?" cried the princess. "I have the power, madam, to give to that person whom I love best as much good sense as can be had. And as, madam, you are that very person, you will have as great a share of it as any one living, provided that you will be pleased to marry me." The princess was quite confused and answered not a word. "I see," replied Riquet with the Tuft, "that this proposal does not please you, and I do not wonder at it. But I will give you a whole year to consider it." The princess, with so little sense, and at the same time so great a longing to have some, and imagining the end of a whole year would never come, accepted the proposal. She had no sooner promised Riquet with the Tuft that she would marry him on that day 12-month, than she found herself quite otherwise than she was before. She had an incredible faculty of speaking whatever she had in her mind in a polite, easy, and natural manner. She began that moment a very gallant conversation with Riquet with the Tuft, which she kept up at such a rate that Riquet with the Tuft believed he had given her more sense than he had reserved for himself. When she returned to the palace, the whole court knew not what to think of such a sudden and extraordinary change. For they heard from her now as much sensible discourse and as many infinitely witty phrases as they had heard stupid ones before. The whole court was overjoyed beyond imagination at it. The king governed himself by her advice, and would even sometimes hold a council in her apartment. The news of this change in the princess spread everywhere. The young princes of the neighbouring kingdoms strove all they could to gain her favour, and almost all of them asked her in marriage. But she found not one of them had wit enough for her. However, one day there came one so powerful, so rich, so witty, and so handsome, that she could not help feeling a strong inclination toward him. Her father perceived it and told her that she was her own mistress as to the choice of a husband, and that perhaps she should declare her intentions. She thanked her father and desired to give her time to consider it. She went by chance to walk in that same wood where she met Riquet with the Tuft, to more conveniently think about what she ought to do. While she was walking in a profound meditation, she heard a confused noise ahead of her, as if there were a great many people busily running backward and forward. And through a clearing she observed a great kitchen full of cooks, kitchen helps, and all sorts of officers necessary for a magnificent entertainment. And there came out of it a company of servants, to the number of 20 or 30, who went to plant themselves about a very long table set up in the forest. The princess, all astonished at this sight, asked them for whom they worked. "For Prince Riquet with the Tuft," said the chief of them, "who was to be married tomorrow." The princess, more surprised than ever, and recollecting all at once that it was now that day 12-month on which she had promised to marry the Prince Riquet with the Tuft, she was ready to sink into the ground. What made her forget this was that when she made this promise, she was very stupid. And having obtained that vast stock of sense that the prince had bestowed upon her, she had entirely forgotten things that she had done in the days of her stupidity. She continued her walk, but had not taken 30 steps before Riquet with the Tuft presented himself to her, gallant and most magnificently dressed, like a prince who was going to be married. "You see, madam," said he, I am exact in keeping my word, and doubt not in the least, but you are come hither to perform your promise." "I frankly confess," answered the princess, "that I have not yet come to a decision in this matter, and I believe I never shall be able to arrive at such a one as you desire." "You astonish me, madam," said Riquet with the Tuft. "I can well believe it," said the princess. "If you sincerely thought to make me your wife, you have been greatly in the wrong to deprive me of my dull simplicity and make me see things much more clearly than I did." "Well, let us come to the facts," replied Riquet with the Tuft. "Putting aside my ugliness and deformity, is there anything in me which displeased you? Are you dissatisfied with my birth, my wit, my humour, or my manners?" "Oh, not at all," answered the princess. "I love you and respect you in all that you mention." "If that be so," said Riquet with the Tuft, "I am happy, since it is in your power to make me the most amiable of men." "Well, how can that be?" said the princess. "It is done," said Riquet with the Tuft, "if you love me enough to wish it was so. The same fairy who on my birthday gave me the power to make the person who pleased me most witty and judicious has in like manner given you the power to make him whom you love most extremely handsome." "If it be so," said the princess, "I wish with all my heart that you may be the most lovable prince in the world, and I bestow my gift on you as much as I am able." The princess no sooner pronounced these words than Riquet with the Tuft appeared to her the finest prince upon earth, the handsomest and most amiable man she ever saw. Now, some affirm that it was not the fairy's charms, but love alone which worked the change. They say that the princess, having made due reflection on the perseverance of her lover, his discretion, and all the good qualities of his mind, his wit and judgment, saw no longer the deformity of his body, nor the ugliness of his face. That his hump seemed to her no more than the grand air of one having a broad back, and that whereas till then she saw him limp horribly, she now found it nothing more than a certain sidling air which charmed her. They say further that his eyes, which were squinted very much, seemed to her most bright and sparkling, that their irregularity passed in her judgment for a mark of the warmth of his affection, and, in short, that his great red nose was, in her opinion, somewhat martial and heroic in character. Well, however it was, the princess promised immediately to marry him, on condition that he obtained the king's consent. The king, knowing that his daughter highly esteemed Riquet with the Tuft, whom he knew also for a most sage and judicious prince, received him for his son-in-law with pleasure, and the next morning their nuptials were celebrated. The end.
We know that times are tough, and that's why our Roundabout Advent stories are free for you to view. But if you would like to make a donation, we would be very grateful for your support. Your Christmas gift could help us to deliver drama therapy support to children and vulnerable adults who are really struggling at this time of heightened anxiety and isolation. Add us to your Christmas list this year and donate whatever you would normally spend on a present for a friend. You can make a real difference to the lives of people who are coping with trauma, disabilities, or challenging mental health issues. Thank you for your support. Thanks again. Bye.